The Central Bank of Nigeria increased interest rates more than anticipated as part of the country's longest stretch of uninterrupted monetary tightening in 11 years, stating its commitment to containing inflation. Governor Godwin Emefiele announced the benchmark was increased to 16.5% from 15.5%. That's 100 basis points. For the first consecutive time by the Monetary Policy Committee on Tuesday in the nation's capital, Abuja. The increase exceeded the median prediction of 12 analysts in a Bloomberg survey for an increase of 75 basis points. President Muhammadu Buhari...
choices were on whether to further hike rates or pause for the impact of the last 3 rate hikes to continue to feed through. At this meeting, therefore, the options considered were primarily to hold or further tighten the policy rate. The options to loosen was not considered, as this would gravely undermine the gains of the last 3 policy rate hikes. Committee Thursday voted by a unanimous vote to raise the NPR. 9 members voted to raise the NPR by 100 basis points, and 2 members voted to raise the NPR by 50 basis points. In summary, MPC voted to 1. Raise the NPR to 16.5%, 2. Retain the asymmetric corridor of plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the NPR, 3. Retain the CRR at 32.5%, and 4. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Beyond that, President Muhammadu Buhari this week unveiled newly designed 1,000 Naira, 500 Naira, and 200 Naira notes. The unveiling of the new bank loans took place in Abuja before the commencement of the weekly cabinet meeting, where the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, said the policy will help control inflation and assist in the fight against corruption. The policy to redesign the legal tender, announced on October 26, 2022, comes almost 2 decades since the last redesign of the Naira. The circulation will take effect from December 15, 2022, while the new and existing currencies will remain legal tender and circulate together until January 31st, 2023.
This morning marks a major milestone in our efforts to solve the numerous challenges facing the management of our legal tender currency, with the unveiling of the 3 redesigned denominations of 1,000 Naira, 500 Naira, and 200 Naira banknotes. I'd like to talk about the need for the currency design, its benefits, the features of the new banknotes, and the unwavering support of Mr. President to the Central Bank of Nigeria. As you are all aware, currency management is a key function of the Central Bank of Nigeria, as enshrined in Section 2, Subsection B of the CBN Act, 2007. Indeed, the integrity of a local currency tender, the efficiency of its supply, as well as its efficacy in the conduct of monetary policy are some of the hallmarks of a great central bank. In recent times, however, currency management in Nigeria has faced several challenges that have continued to grow in scale and sophistication, with unintended consequences for the integrity of both the Central Bank of Nigeria and the country. Some of these challenges primarily include, first, a significant hoarding of banknotes by members of the public, with statistics showing that 2.72 trillion naira out of 3.26 trillion naira currency in circulation as of June 2022 was outside the vaults of our commercial banks across the country and supposedly held by members of the public. These statistics shows that 84.71% of our currency in circulation are outside the vaults of commercial banks, with only 15.29% at the central bank and the commercial bank's vaults. Second, is the worsening shortage of clean and fit bank notes with attendant negative perception of the CBN and increased risk to financial stability. Third, there is increasing ease by criminals and risk of counterfeiting evidenced by several security reports received by the security agencies, the CBN, and the government.
For more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. John Isemede. Dr. John Isemede is the immediate past Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the National Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture, NACIMA, and a one-time consultant to United Nations Industrial Development Organization on export value chain matters. Dr. Isemede, welcome to This Is Live, the Sunday talk show.
Good afternoon. Good morning, those in America. Good afternoon in Africa. And good night in the Far East.
Well, thank you, Dr. Isemede, for joining us. But first, let me start with the benchmark interest rate that the Monetary Policy Committee decided to increase 100 basis points to, as it is now, 15.5%, 16.5% from 15.5%. And the excuse is that, look, this will check high inflation. And this will help to address other distortions within the economy. For example, encourage people to invest more in Naira terms, encourage people to show more interest in the value of the Naira. And that this is consistent with what is going on in the rest of the world. The Federal Reserve of the United States, the Bank of England, which has also increased interest rates, the Bank of Australia, the bank in South Korea, and also, general pattern in the Eurozone. Okay? But what are the gains? There are some people who have said increasing interest, benchmark interest rate, which is the rate at which banks borrow from the central bank, would in fact stifle the same
private sector,
the objectives that the Central Bank of Nigeria wants to achieve. What do you think?
Thank you. There are two angles we have to look at it. Most of these policies are tilted towards the banking sector. Because if you take a holistic view of what is put before the private sector, this is a complete crowding out. Because when we are, in the whole world, you are comparing us with America, Bank of England, Japan, and so on and so forth.
Well, Japan is not tight.
All right. The truth of the matter is that you look at the level of infrastructure. Today, very many of us are not on the street because of the first crisis. And most of these policies are directed at the multinationals. Let us look at the SMEs in South Korea, in China, in Brazil, and all that. They are the engine and the driver of the economy. Now we are talking of inclusion. How many of these people are actually included in this financial sector? Because when you talk of 16%, you are talking of borrowing from the bank and all that. There's no way in the world people don't borrow. But others borrow at 3%. Most of our members have relocated to the neighboring countries because the rates there are better. And not only that, signing agreement on the ECOWAS ETLS, what we cannot do here, they are bringing them there at 0% duty. The private sector, they are crumbling on daily basis. And look at what the banks are posting as profits. They will charge you for COT, charge you for this, charge you for that. Is that the same the private sector is experiencing in the other parts of the country? For instance, the Exim Bank of India will support Indians anywhere in the world. And those who are driving the economy of India today are the SMEs. What we get from Italy, what we get from China, and from the Western world is more or less the private sector and the SMEs. So if the bank now has to take a 16%, take the other side of the coin. If you take your money to the bank and you now want to, what you call fixed deposit and all that, at what rate? If you want to check inflation, so much in the society, what of, even if you come up with this policy, what of the banking supervision aspect? When they came up, they say 80% of money is outside the banking hall. The reason is simple. We are not all criminals, but you take your money to the bank, look at the charges. But if you put your money at home, will they charge you all that? These are things we do. Because the CBN knows the number of currency centers they have in this country. They know the number of banks. They know the bullion cars and all that, where the money is. So we throw it back at them in the area of banking supervision, that this 16%, because the essence of this is, of the liquidity, is to curtail liquidity in the market. First, when you curtail that, inflation will come down. But look at the level, and you say food inflation. Even the food, with the border closure and all that, a greater percentage of the food we have here is still imported. Then, when you take of unemployment, look at the figure of unemployment. And if you assemble all those who are unemployed in Nigeria, in one spot, they will be the fourth largest country in Africa, when you talk of close to 70 million people. Then finally, some of these things that is being pumped to the private sector, because the banks are not into business, a bank is a midwife, where you take the deficit spender and the surplus spender together. But the rate at which people are borrowing in a country where we don't have electricity, a country where distribution is an issue, they should include the private sector, especially the SME, to drive this economy.
Well, but whereas the Monetary Policy Committee decided to further tighten the benchmark interest rate, right?
We import a lot of things.
It retained all the others, other indicators. The asymmetric corridor was not changed. The cash reserve ratio was not changed. The liquidity ratio, LR, was also not changed.
But now we should first of all look at it that Nigeria is now a global player, being that we are signed the WTO and all the agreements. And so also we should look at our neighboring countries. Because part of the agreement we sign is that people put things into our neighboring countries, and before you say Jack, is right here. If you don't, the countries we are competing with, some of them are getting loans at 3%. Because the figures you gave is not comparable with that of Nigeria. It is not possible now for me to live here today and go to Ibadan by road or to Benin. The traffic. All right. What of the cost of production in Nigeria? These are some of the things we consider. Because if such policies, what they apply in Malaysia, in South Korea, in China, there is no reason why they will produce there, bring it to Nigeria, about 10 to 15,000 kilometers, and still beat us less than 50 kilometers to our own markets. So we have to review this. Even if you have to keep it at that rate, what of the social infrastructure for us to compete?
Okay, infrastructure, making the economy more productive. I think, even non-economists can relate to that. But let's move quickly to this, the redesign of the Naira. The CBN governor says that the whole idea of this is to curb inflation. The whole idea of this is to promote monetary policy and also promote financial inclusion and also promote economic growth. And that on top of all of that, it's a legal thing to do because for more than 20 years, Nigeria has not designed its currency. But some people say, this is not a redesign, that the federal government just carried Baba Blue and poured it on the 1,000 Naira note and just changed the color of 500 and 200 Naira notes. There is the issue about the coloration, recoloration, as some people call it, or the value of the Naira itself.
Thank you very much. I have not seen the new currency, apart from watching it in the television. I will give you 115 years of currencies, printing, minting, because our brother Henry Boyo said, we sell oil in hard currency. There is no point where we have to print money and distribute to the states, since the states can buy in dollar. But one thing we should understand is that dollar is money, but it's not a legal tender in Nigeria. When you say want to curb inflation, in what way? That is difficult for me to explain to students and all that. Two, the first time we heard of currency notes and all that was in 1907. In 1912, the British West Africa introduced the currency into Nigeria. The First World War was 1914 to 1918. After the First World War, then there was room for reconstruction and rehabilitation. Then international trade now began to flow. That was why they had the meeting in Belgium in 1920. And after that meeting, the whole of the four English-speaking in West Africa introduced the West African currency. And before CBN took off in 1959, First Bank Marina was the central bank of Nigeria, playing the role of central bank. All right, we had this experience in 58, looking at Edmond report, and the monetary policy in all the central banks of the world, almost universal. It's only few things you change to suit your own condition. All right, what was the value of the West African currency to the US dollar in the 70s? It was 25 kobo, and 1,000. And 1 naira was equivalent to 1,000 sefa. Today, it is 1,200 naira to 1 sefa. 1973, we had the first naira and kobo, and it became 50 kobo to the US dollar. 1977, General Olusegun Obasanjo introduced the 20 naira, equivalent to 45 US dollar. 1999, 100 naira, 2,200, 2005, 500, and 2010, under Obasanjo and Professor Soludo. Now, if you are talking of redenomination, a lot of money could have been saved for this country based on what Ghana did in 2007. But Ghana did not fare better after the denomination, because the CD became bigger or heavier than the US dollar. Within 10 years, the CD lost about 600%. Today, it's 14 to 15 CDs to 1 US dollar. So very many of us are not still very comfortable that it will solve the issue of inflation, insecurity, because a lot of people, based on the bank charges and all that, they don't go to the bank. If you look at my own state, my local government, there is no single bank.
Where is that?
I'm from Edo State. There is no single bank from Ozala to Sabogo
Edo
Daura.
State is supposed to be a cosmopolitan state.
But Benin, Uromi, Ekpoma, Auchi, that is what we are painting here. What has come to our rescue is nothing but the POS. But the time of Dr. Ogbemudia, we have banks all over the place. But banks now site in major cities and all that. And if you now say, you want the currency out of circulation, that will not solve the problem. Because redenomination could have saved us a lot of money. And the greatest headache now is not inflation, it's not the amount of money in circulation. What we are saying, there's a project which the central bank is running, which is the single currency in West Africa. Are we going to jettison it? And if we do, what will happen to the Naira, the new Naira note that we're introducing? If we can use trillions of Naira to reprint or to redesign, what will happen? Because it will not have a second-hand value.
Yeah, okay. It's good you brought this angle to it. This idea of common currency in West Africa, and even a common currency even for the African Union. These things have been on the table for long.
They'll be on the table for over 20.
Forever.
For 45 years.
Yeah, but it's not, those ideas are not moving at pace. So we in Nigeria now have to say, oh, because we want to create a common currency region, then Nigeria cannot take its own decisions, considering the fact that there are sharp differences between the Francophone and the Anglophone sections of West Africa, affecting this protocol on the idea of common currency.
Thank you very much.
So I'm surprised you are bringing that up.
Thank you very much, because I belong to the two angles. I've worked in the Francophone, I'm bilingual, French and English. We have 55 countries in Africa. 54 of them are members of the WTO, except Eritrea. And the 54 members are also part of the Africa Continental Free Trade.
Yes.
And now we are talking of a single currency in Africa. Africa, we have 54, we have 42 different currencies, apart from the CFA that is convertible. So West Africa, when we started, it was 16 countries. Now it has been reduced to 15. We have 10 different currencies, and from 10 different currencies, now 8, because Guinea-Bissau surrendered their currency to the CFA, the BCAO, and Nigeria has the Naira. It's not convertible. That is not the issue of running a single currency. What we have not been able to tell ourselves is that let this single currency be in two phases. First, Nigeria, Ghana, Guinea, Liberia, Cape Verde, to start the first phase. Because the issue started in 1975. From there to the present day, 45 years, what have we achieved? By the time the Francophone was about to surrender their currency to the French franc about to surrender to the euro, that was why we put the Premier West Africa Monetary Institute in Ghana. And if you look at it, we had West Africa Clearing House. We did not even give us the first step because of the multiple currencies and the exchange rate and the rate of devaluation of West African currencies. And by 2000, we had from the West Africa Clearing House, we have the West Africa Monetary Agency, the same issue. What came to our aid was the new generation banks that we could trade among ourselves. Then come to the real West African Monetary Zone, where we have 8 currencies. One belongs to each of the 15 members. And that one, as I'm talking to you, is exchanging at almost 500 to $1. And that currency has been tied to the French franc as far back as 1941. It is not the French. Here we have Emefiele, our governor of central bank. Benin Republic does not have governor of central bank. They only have currency center. Here we talk of NPR, we talk of interest rate, and we talk of monetary policy and all that. In the Francophone, it is not possible.
Well,
if we go,
Isemede,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
If we can just focus on what Nigeria has done. All this idea of having a common currency in West Africa, having a common currency in Africa, I don't think it's an idea that will work. Look, the central banks have relative strength. Many of these central banks, as you yourself you have identified, they are very weak. And if you look in terms of the economy, the capacity of the individual economics within this arrangement, these are economies that are far behind Nigeria. So we are not going to subject our sovereignty to some idea about African currency, West African currency. Let us deal with this one. This is our own Naira.
There's a solution to it.
What is the solution to
solution
making the Naira have a strong value?
All right. A country with a very low productive base cannot have a strong currency. For us to strengthen the Naira. In the 70s and 80s, the Naira was the currency in West Africa. People were going to Ghana, Sierra Leone, and all that with Naira. They welcomed me with the Naira. People were going to London, the Oxford Street and all that, going to Saudi Arabia. What was the rate at that time? It was 50 kobo to $1. If today it's 1 Naira, because when we started this project, our suggestion was that let us strengthen the Naira and increase our productive base, reduce importation. Let us strengthen the Naira. Other countries will look for the Naira. Today, people are looking for dollar just because of the weight, not that you cannot use Naira to do your transaction. The Naira that was one Naira to 1,000 in the 70 today is 1,200. So single currency or no single currency, let us look inward. Because surrendering our currency is like surrendering our sovereignty.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's talk about the point that both the CBN governor and the president of Nigeria made about how these new Naira notes will check counterfeiting. Because, as we've been told by CBN officials, from the governor to the director of currency operations, the director of monetary operations, certain features have been put into this new note that will prevent counterfeiting. And the CBN governor says the objective is to reduce the amount of money outside the banking system. 3.2 billion outside the banking system. 165 billion has been brought in so far.
Wow.
But the director of currency operations says the CBN is determined to bring in all of that so that the CBN can have a full idea of the amount of currency in circulation. Do you think they will be able to achieve that?
It depends on the structure they have on ground. What led to this? Based on what I said earlier on. The bank charges, and so on and so forth. 5 Naira note is disappearing like the coins. 10 Naira note, but 20 Naira note is what you see in the rural areas. The 200 Naira note, the 500 Naira note, and the 1,000 is more or less in the city center. This is the one they are counterfeiting because the cost of producing or counterfeiting 10 Naira or 20 Naira is much more than the face value. No one will go there. So we have to tell the central bank to assist the banks by reducing cash. Because there's no reason why you go and buy a plot of land for 60 million and bring in cash. You go to, because in Nigeria you can sell cars by the roadside, and you move there, they will tell you it's 10 or 20 million. And people begin to count cash. So it's not that they are pushing this thing to us. We have to push it back to them and say, put a procedure in place. There's no reason why any transaction, why an individual should involve in a transaction of more than 200,000. You have been to the UK, you've been to America, you go to a shop in the UK, you bring out 50 pounds. The young lady or the man will look at you. Because of your color and all that, they will know that we are visitors. They will go and get clearance. Is that the situation in Nigeria? So if you want to stop counterfeiting, if you want to remove 80% and the trillion outside the banking hall, put a structure in place. Nigerians are good people. They will obey. It's not putting your money in the bank. Every month they call you COT. They call you service of ATM and all that. And banks are smiling with billions of naira. And the private sector are now posting losses, closing shop, and moving to other countries.
Actually, Dr. Isemede, the same point you made about 50 pounds notes in the UK was made by the CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele. And he was saying, they will find a way of withdrawing large denominations from circulation. And the question is, how about those businesses that depend on those denominations? Small-scale businesses that depend on large volume of cash. And those persons who go to parties every weekend and who want to show off, and they want to carry bales of crisp, clean Naira notes that are not available in the banking halls, and they want to show that they can plunk. Yes, I know.
Thank you.
I know there's a law against it.
2 weeks ago, a young lady stopped me at Ojota. What are you looking for? He brought out bail of new notes. And when you go to ATM, what do you get? Money with sellotape and all that. So the banking sector, the CBN and all that, should please check. And it should not be an excuse why we have huge amount of money. Where do they get those new notes? And today, the issue of moving cash from one part of the world to the other or from one household to the other is no longer an issue. You have the ATM where you can point and transfer. You have the POS, and so on and so forth. So they should check. If we now talk of Naira, what of the dollar in circulation? There are places here, years past, where some landlords and schools say they must pay in dollar. Was CBN able to check that? Is dollar is money in Nigeria, but it's not a legal tender. The second issue is that you licensed the BDCs. Who was checking? These are part of the problems we had in 1991, because by 1959 to 1991, CBN was under finance. Why did President General Ibrahim Babangida remove CBN? Because of this poor banking supervision, and it has to be part of the presidency. All right.
Maybe to ensure the independence of the central bank.
All right, the independence of the central bank. Have they been able to check? All right, when you license the BDCs, few days later, or few months or few years, you close the doors against them. And this same Nigeria is a country where you see a man standing by the roadside, right from Akuti. You go to Ibadan, you see them, you go to Benin to come and buy $1 a pound. Is it possible for you to buy, you move into a hotel in Addis Ababa with bear? You must show them how you got that money. Even if you bring dollar into some countries, you must show evidence, the source, because dollar is not money in Nigeria. So whether it's going to check inflation, money in supply and all that, it is the responsibility of the banking supervision.
Okay. I hope the persons in charge of banking supervision in Nigeria are listening to you. But let me ask you one question. And the response should be very brief, because we have to go. The National Bureau of Statistics says poverty in Nigeria is up to 63%. Over 65% of these persons who are poor live in the north, 35% in the south, 72% in the rural areas, 20-something% in the urban areas. But another report says, in fact, on the aggregate, net aggregate, the poverty rate in Nigeria, that's a report produced by Kingsley Moghalu.
He's a CBN deputy governor.
Well, no, he's no longer a CBN deputy governor. But he says that, in fact, the poverty rate is up to about 90%, not 63%. How do we deal with this challenge of poverty with inflation rate at 21.09%, with benchmark interest rate at 16.5%, with food inflation at over 23%, unemployment at over 33%. So what do? We have a new government coming in 2023. Briefly, so that we move on.
Thank you very much. Let's go with the average of Professor Moghalu and that of them. But as a nation, we are to go with Bureau of Statistics. Even if we have to go with Bureau of Statistics, if you assemble the unemployed people in Nigeria in one place, it will be the 4th largest country in the world. That is glaring based on what we say, what we saw in the last 2023 budget. 20 trillion, you are going to borrow almost 50%. And we have a lot of MDAs without targets. Every day you hear of seminars and workshops. What are we going to get from the export processing zone? And we are signed the AFTA agreement. Nobody has told us that this is how much we are going to get. So the incoming administration has a lot to do. We are going to inherit a lot of debt. And for the first 2 years, it will be a difficult thing for any of us to solve. The first thing now is that countries that have moved from third world, developing to developed world today, is not through miracle, it's not through VG and all that, it's through hard work, it's through production, it's through backward integration and import substitution. There are some low-hanging fruits we can look into. All right, we are talking of oil. Why in 115 years or 60 years when oil was discovered, we have not been able to have a functional refinery, even after changing name from NNPC to NNPC Limited? What of the solid minerals? We have 55 discovered, and today we are still importing ties and all that. There are so many things we can do. What of the diaspora arrangement? Because there are 196 countries in the world, but that is independent countries, not territories and all that. We have 104, at the last check, we have 104 embassies. What are we getting back to Nigeria? Our diaspora remittances based in line with what the Indians and the Chinese are doing. China did not colonize one inch of Africa or Russia, but they are able to build a chain across the globe with the Chinatown concept. Bring things from China and suffocate us here. And the competition here is so keen that my members of the private sector have all been thrown out. You go to where, even to buy bottled mineral, whatever you call it. Some people have taken it because it's only their own brand. And these are imported brands. At the end of the day, you are looking for dollars. Some multinationals will come here. They are only interested in the 200 million Nigerians. They come here with pioneer status. After 5 years, they go back and they come back in a new name. What are they contributing? The CBN governor should sit down with the private sector and map out strategy how we have to help the 50 million SMEs in Nigeria. Okay. That is the solution.
Well, on that note, Dr. Isemede, I would like to thank you very much for joining us on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show.